2 Samuel chapter 18, preparation for battle. After mustering the troops he had with him, David placed officers in command of units of 1,000 and units of 100. David then divided the troops 3 ways: a third under Joab, a third under Abishai son of Zeruiah, and brother of Joab, and a third under Ittai the Gittite. The king said to the troops, "I intend to go out with you myself." But they replied, "You must not come out with us, for if we flee, no one will care. Even if half of us die, no one will care, but you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore it is better that we have you to help us from the city." The king said to them, "I will do what you think best." So the king stood by the gate as all the soldiers marched out, the units of 100 and 1,000. But the king gave this command to Joab, Abishai, and Ittai: "Be gentle with young Absalom for my sake." All the soldiers heard as the king gave commands to the various leaders with regard to Absalom. Defeat of Absalom's forces. David's army then took the field against Israel, and a battle was fought in the forest near Mahanaim. The forces of Israel were defeated by David's servants, and the casualties there that day were heavy, 20,000 men. The battle spread out over the entire region, and the forest consumed more combatants that day than did the sword. Death of Absalom. Absalom unexpectedly came up against David's servants. He was mounted on a mule, and as the mule passed under the branches of a large oak tree, his hair caught fast in the tree. He hung between heaven and earth, while the mule under him kept going. Someone saw this and reported to Joab, "I saw Absalom hanging from an oak tree." Joab said to the man who told him this, "If you saw him, why did you not strike him to the ground on the spot? Then it would have been my duty to give you 50 pieces of silver and a belt." The man replied to Joab, "Even if I already had 1,000 pieces of silver in my 2 hands, I would not lay on the king's son, for in our hearing the king gave you and Abishai and Ittai a command: protect the young Absalom for my sake. Had I been disloyal and killed him, it would all have come out before the king, and you would stand aloof." Joab replied, "I will not waste time with you in this way." And taking 3 pikes in hand, he thrust for the heart of Absalom. He was still alive in the tree, when 10 of Joab's young armor-bearers closed into Absalom and killed him with further blows. Joab then sounded the horn, and the soldiers turned back from the pursuit of the Israelites, because Joab called them to halt. They took Absalom and cast him into a deep pit in the forest, and built up a very large mound of stones over him, and all the Israelites fled to their own tents. During his lifetime, Absalom had taken a pillar and set it up for himself in the king's valley. For he said, "I have no son to perpetuate my name." The pillar which he named for himself is called Absalom's monument to this present day. David told of Absalom's death, and Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said, "Let me run to take the good news to the king, that the Lord has set him free from the power of his enemies." But Joab said to him, "You are not the man to bring the news today. On some other day you may take the good news, but today you would not be bringing good news, for in fact the king's son is dead." Then Joab said to a Cushite, "Go tell the king what you have seen." The Cushite bowed to Joab and ran off, but Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, said to Joab again, "Come what may, permit me also to run after the Cushite." Joab replied, "Why do you want to run, my son? You will receive no reward." But he insisted, "Come what may, I want to run." Joab said to him, "Run." Ahimaaz took the way of the Jordan plain and outran the Cushite. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and a lookout mounted to the roof of the gate above the city wall, where he looked out and saw a man running all alone. The lookout shouted to inform the king, who said, "If he is alone, he has good news to report." As he kept coming nearer, the lookout spied another runner. From his place atop the gate, he cried out, "There is another man running by himself." And the king responded, "He too is bringing good news." And the lookout said, "I notice that the first one looks like Ahimaaz, son of Zadok." The king replied, "He is a good man. He comes with good news." Then Ahimaaz called out and greeted the king. With face to the ground, he paid homage to the king and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who rebelled against my lord the king." But the king asked, "Is young Absalom safe?" And Ahimaaz replied, "I saw a great disturbance when the king's servant Joab sent your servant on, but I do not know what it was." The king said, "Step aside and remain in attendance here." So he stepped aside and remained there. When the Cushite came in, he said, "Let my lord The king received the good news that this day the Lord has freed you from the power of all that rose up against you. The king asked the Cushite, "Is young Absalom all right?" The Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rebel against you with evil intent be as that young man." The king was shaken and went up to the room over the city gate and wept. He said as he wept, "My son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son, my son." Job reproves David. Job was told the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom, and that day's victory was turned into mourning for the whole army. When they heard the king is grieving for his son, the soldiers stole into the city that day like men, shamed by flight and battle. Meanwhile the king covered his face, cried out in a loud voice, "My son Absalom, Absalom, my son, my son." So Job went to the king's residence and said, "Though they saved your lives and your sons' and your daughters' lives and the lives of your wives and your concubines, you have put all your servants to shame today by loving those who hate you and hating those who love you. For you have announced today that officers and servants are nothing to you. Indeed, I am now certain that if Absalom were alive today, and all of us dead, that would be fine with you. Now then, get up, go out, and speak kindly to your servants. I swear by the Lord that if you do not go out, not a single man will remain with you overnight, and this will be a far greater disaster for you than any that has come upon you from your youth until now." So the king got up and sat at the gate. When all the people were told, "The king is sitting at the gate," they came into his presence. The reconciliation. Now the Israelites had fled to their separate tents, but throughout the tribes of Israel all the people were arguing among themselves, saying to one another, "The king delivered us from the grasp of enemies, and it was he who rescued us from grasp of the Philistines. Now he has fled the country before Absalom, but Absalom, whom we anointed over us, has died in battle. Why then should you remain silent about restoring the king to his palace?" When the king of all Israel reached the king, David sent word to the priests Zadok and Abiathar, "Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be last to restore the king to this palace? You are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh. Why should you be last to restore the king? Also say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? May God do thus to me and more, if you do not become commander of my army permanently in place of Job." He won the hearts of the Judahites altogether, and so they sent a message to king, "Return with all your servants, David and Shemaiah." So the king returned, and when he reached the Jordan, Judah had come to Gilgal to meet him and to bring him across the Jordan. Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried down with the Judahites to meet King David, accompanied by 1,000 men from Benjamin. Ziba, too, the servant of the house of Saul, accompanied by his 15 sons and 20 servants, hastened to the Jordan before the king. They crossed over the ford to bring the king's household over and to do whatever he wished. When Shimei, son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell down before the king and said to him, "May my lord not hold me guilty. Do not remember or take to heart the wrong that your servant did the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. For your servant knows that I have done wrong, but I am the first of the whole house of Joseph to come down today to meet my lord the king." But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, countered, "Shimei must be put to death for this. He cursed the anointed of the Lord." David replied, "What has come between you and me, sons of Zeruiah, that you would become my adversaries this day? Should anyone die today in Israel, am I not aware that today I am king over Israel?" Then the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king gave him his oath. David and Meribaal, son of Saul, also went down to meet the king. He had not cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king left until he returned safely. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king asked him, "Why did you not go with me?" "Meribaal," he replied, "My lord king, my servant deceived me. For my servant said to him, 'Saddle the donkey for me, that I may ride on it and go with the king.' Your servant is lame, but he slandered your servant before the lord the king. But my lord the king is like you, an angel of God. Do whatever seems good to you, for though my father's entire house deserved only death from my lord the king, yet you placed your servant among those who eat at your table. What right do I still have to make further appeal to the king?" The king said to him, "Why do you go talking? I say you and Ziba shall divide the property." "Meribaal," answered the king, "Indeed, let him take it all, now that my lord the king has returned safely to his house." David and Barzillai and Gileadite also came down from Rogelim and escorted the king to the Jordan for his crossing. Taking leave of him at the Jordan, it was Barzillai, a very old man of 80, who had provided for the king during his stay in Mahanaim. He was a very great man. The king said to Barzillai, "Cross over with me. I will provide for your old age as my guest in Jerusalem." But Barzillai answered the king, "How much longer have I to live, that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I am now 80 years old. Can I distinguish between good and evil? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks, or still hear the voices of men and women singers? Why should your servant be any further burden to my lord the king? In escorting the king across the Jordan, your servant is doing little enough. Why should the king give me this reward? Please let your servant go back to die in my own city by the tomb of my father and mother. Here is your servant Shiham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever seems good to you." Then the king said to him, "Shimham shall cross over with me, and for him I will do whatever seems good to you, and anything else you would like for me to do for you, I will do." Then all the people crossed over the Jordan, but the king remained. He kissed Barzillai and bade him farewell as he returned to his own place. Finally, the king crossed over to Gilgal, accompanied by Shimham. Israel and Judah's quarrel. All of the people of Judah and half of the people of Israel had escorted the king across. But then all these Israelites began coming to the king and saying, "Why did our brothers and Judahites steal you away and bring the king and his household across the Jordan along with all of David's men?" All the Judahites replied to the men of Israel, "Because the king is our relative. Why are you angry over this? Have we had anything to eat at the king's expense, or have portions from his table been given to us?" The Israelites answered the Judahites, "We have 10 shares in the king. Also, we are the firstborn rather than you. Why do you slight us? Were we not first to speak of restoring our king?" Then the Judahites in turn spoke even more fiercely than the Israelites.